Pollen does more than give you a bad case of the sneezes.
Achoo!
Pollen needs to travel in order to do its job, but how does that happen? Let's do some investigating in this episode all about pollinators. Pollen cannot move on its own. Different plants rely on different agents to bring the male pollen to the female stigma. Living agents called biotic pollinators do about 80% of the work. Although insects, bees, butterflies, flies, beetles are the most common pollinators, larger animals such as birds and bats play a vital role in pollination. We will get to these guys in a minute. Non-living, abiotic agents like wind and water are important pollinators for some types of plants. Grasses, corn, and some types of trees like pine rely on wind to transfer pollen. These plants produce massive amounts of pollen to increase the chances of pollination to occur. For example, pine pollen can be so thick in the air that it can be seen as long yellowish clouds streaming off the trees on a windy day. My eyes itch just thinking about it. First, a flower's bright colors and fragrance attract pollinators. Then the pollinator arrives at the flower to collect nectar, a sweet, sugary liquid. You could say that nectar is the currency of pollination. The feeding pollinator then rubs against the anthers. Pollen then gets stuck to the pollinator. They then move on to another flower for some more nectar. As it feeds, the pollen from the anther then rubs off onto the stigma of the new flower. This pollen then travels down the style of the flower into the ovary. This plant has now been fertilized. The ovary of the flower will then turn into a fruit with seeds, which will then be dispersed to become new plants. Through time, these seed-producing plants have adapted and specialized to their specific agents of pollination. The pollen of plants that rely on the wind is often small, lightweight, and highly exposed, produced at times where there are fewer leaves to block wind currents. Plants that rely on insects or other animals for pollination often have sticky pollen that can be picked up on visitor bodies, beaks, and wings. But they also must use a strategy to attract and keep the pollinators visiting. Most flowers use specific colors and color combinations in their petals to capture the pollinator's interest. Most insects are attracted to flowers that are blue, purple, or yellow, while hummingbirds go for red hues. The color pattern is also important. Many petals incorporate stripes like landing lights at an airport. Flower shape plays a big role in determining what species of pollinator can get to where the nectar is stored. Open, broad flowers provide a landing pad for butterflies. Trumpet-shaped cater to hummingbirds. The twisted form of the snapdragon favors tiny insects that can crawl into small spaces. Monkshood has tightly closed flowers that only the strongest pollinators, such as bumblebees, can force their way into. So wait. Why would some flowers only want one type of pollinator? Wouldn't flowers want to attract as many types as possible? Not if they want to make sure that their pollen reaches the right flower. Imagine you're in a field of wildflowers, tons of different plant species. Pollen from a bluebonnet will not fertilize wild cosmos. So if the bluebonnets can look really good to bees and not so good to butterflies, then the bees will go from bluebonnet to bluebonnet, transporting the correct pollen to the perfect flower. The smell of flowers can also lure some pollinators. Beetles, such as ladybugs, choose fruity smelling blooms. These flowers mimic the scent of ripe fruit to trick the beetles into visiting them for food. Some flowers smell downright foul to us. The red trillium, for instance, has evolved to attract flies. What better way to do so than to mimic the color and smell of a fly's favorite food? Rotting meat. Yuck. Some flowers open only at night and are light-colored to better attract nocturnal pollinators, like these moonflowers that smell wonderful, that have bright white flowers that reflect the moonlight and are pollinated by the sphinx moth. Different types of animals see color differently and have different preferences. For instance, bees see in ultraviolet, so this is both a plant and pollinator adaptation. I think it's time for an investigation. If you're still here liking this video, you can show your support by hitting that like button, and most importantly, please subscribe. Let's investigate. Here are some supplies you may need. Some flowers of different shapes and sizes, a UV or ultraviolet light, and some eye protection from the UV light. I want to try and discover remember how different some of these flowers may look to these pollinators who can see light outside of the visible spectrum. Now that we have our safety glasses on, let's turn off these lights and check it out. Whoa, you can see how these pistils and the stamen, it looks like the ovary of these lilies. Like, it's crazy. It lights up so bright. Okay, now we're gonna look at the kangaroo paw. The flowers are so small, but it's like a landing zone. The pollen is lighting up so bright. It still looks red under the UV light. Oh, the pollen is so bright. It's bright yellow. Some of the flowers are brighter than others. The long beak of the hummingbird is able to reach down into the flower to reach the nectar. And bat pollinators have a long, flexible tongue to help them reach inside of a flower. More than 500 species of plants are pollinated by bats. Bees and butterflies have a specialized structure called a proboscis. This is a straw-like structure that fits down into the flower, kind of like a straw fits into a glass. Bumblebees perform buzz pollination by vibrating their wings like a tuning fork to open the blossoms of the tomato, potato, and blueberry plants. The next time you're enjoying a nice piece of fruit, take a second to appreciate those hardworking pollinators. If you want to learn more about flowers, you can check out this video next. Swallowtail! Pollinators.